And then I always like to showcase some books that we have at the library. These two are by Robert Litt and his wife, Robert and Hannah Litt. And if you're ever interested in just some basic, solid, fun information on chickens, this was their first book, second book. As time went on, they changed their mind about a couple things, so you almost have to have both books. But they're fun books. They give you a lot of really good basic information. And then this is one we just got. It's called The Small Scale Poultry Flock. So it's for home and market chicken raisers, and it's got some terrific information in it. So those are available for you at the Hailey Public Library. And then it is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Amy. Amy is the program director for the Sun Valley Institute for Resilience, and in that role helped launch the 5B Resilience Gardens collaboration in 2020. She serves on the Blaine County Food Council and is a board member of Idaho Center for Sustainable Agriculture. It's a little odd to introduce yourself, but here we go. I'm the library's programs and engagement manager. I've organized programs for over 30 years that seek to build community and foster intimate connections with this amazing place we call home. I'm the president of the Wood River chapter of the Idaho Native Plant Society and serve on the Bellevue Parks Committee. So without any further ado, Amy and I met, well, I met because she teaches classes with Manuel Gaudreau, gardening classes, and we just got to talking, and I said I was thinking about getting chickens, and she said, oh yeah, I'm thinking about getting chickens too, and I said, yeah, I'm having a hard time finding a coop, and she said, well, I have a coop that I'm trying to get rid of. And I'm like, really? So we spent the next, 6 months or so talking about this or that or this or that. And I got my chickens a little bit before hers. They're celebrating yesterday was their first birthday. They were born on March 1st. And we just got to talking and thought that just a little program called Lessons from the Coop would be a fun thing to do together. So we've had a lot of fun pulling it together.
It's really fun to look at photos and videos of chickens.
It's like, oh, look at this one.
And to think about all the things we've learned in time. Do you want me to go? Okay. So when I talk about gardening and chickens, I kind of put in that same way. I think it's always important to start with assessing your why. Understand why you want to raise chickens. Is it because you really want eggs? Do you want to harvest your own chickens for meat? Are they fun? Do you want the compost from them? And when you think about the why, it really helps you kind of understand the purpose of it, but also how to design around your why. So I can give you some examples for myself that we really wanted eggs. We eat like over 3 dozen eggs a week. Eggs are expensive. The cost has gotten more expensive. I'm also an avid gardener, so I wanted the compost from them. Chickens are also really fun and exciting. And we went from a little small yard in Hailey to a half-acre lot in Gannett, and we finally had room to get chickens. I want to have more farm animals, but chickens were a good start for me. We also think it's important to focus on what are the municipal rules and regulations. So City of Hailey, you can't have roosters. Not sure about Bellevue, you probably can't have roosters either. Where I am, I have no limitations. You might be in Blaine County unincorporated, but you might be in an HOA that has their own rules. Some of the rules are how far away the coop has to be from your fence line. Some have to be about not letting them fly around. So it's really important to know the rules in the area that you live so you're not upsetting any neighbors by chickens flying around or cock-a-doodle-doodle happening all night long, which it does happen all night long. It's not just a morning thing. I think one thing Kristin and I really wanted to touch on is kind of the approach. We both went into it thinking that we were going to be pretty strict with organic. That means organic feed, organic treats, and we've learned through practice that it might not be possible to be 100% organic all the time, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but kind of knowing your own values in it and bringing that into your why. And then also, and this other one also for me talks about how I manage my garden, this neat and tidy philosophy. Are you more okay with a little mess here and there? Chickens are relatively messy, right? So it doesn't look pretty all the time. So if neat and tidy is really important to you, you'll want to design your space and your coop and think about the amount of chickens with that in mind.
Mm-hmm. I just add that in Bellevue, you can have 4 hens. Keep that in mind as you watch the slideshow. And also the neat and tidy philosophy, chickens poop 15 to 30 times a day. And whether they're on the yard or they're in the coop or the run, there is poop everywhere. So I have chicken shoes, I have chicken gloves, I have a chicken jacket, and I'm not strict about it, but there is disease that can be transferred between chickens and people. So when I finish working in the coop, I wash my hands, and if I've been cleaning the coop, I'll just rinse off my face too. I think my chickens are pretty clean, but they poop a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. So thinking through the why, then coupling it with your resources. So when we talk about resources, we're talking about money, right? So your budget. We're also talking about your time. Do you work a full-time or two different jobs? Do you have kids? Do you have a busy life where you travel a lot? None of those are reasons not to get chickens. It's just important to think about that as you think through the size of flock and then how you want to build your coop. It's important to think about, obviously, how much space you have in your area. And I think for me, the big one is who's going to care for them. When I first wanted to bring chicks home, my husband was not very excited about that because we already have dogs and a big garden and we both work full time. So I said, I'll do it all. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. You just have to build the coop for me. He is now the chicken father of the year. He loves the chickens, but I didn't expect that. So I went into it thinking that I was gonna have to do all the care, and it was a blessing that he became a little bit more responsible for them. But if you're in a situation that one person in your household is really excited and other people aren't, just think about that. Like, I travel a lot for work, so it wouldn't work out if my husband was unwilling to take care of the chickens at all, which luckily he is. Mm-hmm. And Kristin has kind of a different setup than I do with that.
I live alone, so everything had to be user-friendly for me. So when I was looking at a coop, I wanted to make sure that when I stepped into the coop that I didn't have to bend over. It had to be 6 feet high, and you'll see how I modified the existing coop. I looked into buying them. There's some absolutely darling coops on the website. I mean, every kind. They look like barns, they look like houses, they're just wonderful. Most of them are about that tall, and if they aren't that tall, they're about that thick. So really look carefully. A lot of times they'll show a coop on the lawn and you're like, oh, that's just exactly what I want. But then when you start looking at the actual measurements, that is not what you want. Mm-hmm. I thought about building my own, but then it's like, oh my gosh. And some of the store-bought ones, I mean, they're $600 anyway. Sometimes you can get them a little cheaper, but you can certainly get them more expensive. There's some beautiful ones that the Quakers make, and they're couple $1,000s, but they are works of art. I mean, you would love to just walk up to that coop, Mm-hmm. You also have to think about where you're going to put your feed, where you're going to put your bedding, what's your storage going to look like. Are you going to run power and water to the coop? That was my idea, and then my handyman went on a month-long vacation, and when he came back, it was snowing and cold, and so I've got, don't tell anybody, I've got electric cables coming from an outlet on the house wall going up into a power strip, and it works fine. I'm careful with it, it works fine, but next year I'm going to bring actual power to the house. So.
And I want to kind of share the story of how you got a coop from us, because people are like, well, why would you get rid of a coop? And then you built a new one. So when last summer, Kristin invited me to give a permaculture. I'm a permaculture design. I have a certificate in it, and I assessed my yard through the permaculture lens, which talks about zones. The chicken coop I had in my yard was all the way in the way back, shaded by these tall pine trees, north facing, right by my neighbors that have 8 dogs. And that's where the coop was when we moved into the house. We bought it, and that's where the coop was. It was also too small for the size of flock that we wanted. My husband, also being a building artistic person, built this beautiful coop at our old house, and we transported it with us down to Gannett. And I said, you know, I want to see the chickens from my kitchen window because I want to make sure they're out running around and I don't have to walk all the way to the edge in the snow. We also thought about water and power and how we would get that to the coop all the way out there on the other side of the yard. And we also thought about size. So I said, we're not going to use that coop, but it's a usable coop, so can we get it to someone who would use it? And getting it off the property was challenging.
It's challenging.
It was challenging. If you all remember last spring, it was a wet, cold, long, lingering spring, so we were like, the snow's almost melted. It's almost melted. And then it's muddy. But we got it, and then we added on to the original coop that my husband had built, but some of the things that Kristin mentioned with height and storage were not part of our original coop build out. So we're actually going to be expanding our coop this coming season so that we can walk in there to clean it, so that we can store. Right now all of our stuff is in our garage, so we have to carry buckets back and forth with pine shavings or feed, so we're going to incorporate all that. So it's been a learning process for us to create the coop that we wanted.
So this is just a short and sweet look at what happens when you get chickens. You pick them up and they're 1 day old. They're those little balls of fluff that we all think of when we think of chicks. And you pick them up and they're on day 2. And at that point, people usually call them peeps. You know, you buy chicks, but when they come home, it's peeps. And I've got a video, but by day 7, they're already starting to go from those little balls of fluff to actually growing real feathers. It's really cool. And it seems like between day 1 chicks and 2 months, when they're like teenagers, they're called pullets, that's a pretty long time. We'll talk a little bit about where we each kept them when they were little babies, but it actually comes really quickly because your coop and your bedding and your water and your electric has to be ready to go when these girls are 2 months old. And it's amazing. It's like time compresses and goes real fast. And then once they're there for 2 months, you have to feed them for 2 to 4 months. Just give them food while they get big enough and mature enough to start laying eggs. So there's an investment of time before you get those first beautiful, gorgeous eggs. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that is a great timeline. So we wanted to kind of talk through choosing your chickens. There's a lot to think about when choosing chickens. So it kind of goes back to your why again, right? If your why is you really want eggs, you might look at breeds that produce a lot of eggs. So when you're looking, so this photo that has 8 different breeds on it is from Dunlap Hatchery, which is a hatchery in Caldwell. You can order direct from their website. You can also order their peeps, their chicks from Rancher Supply in Peekaboo, which is where Kristin and I both got our chickens from this past season. So when you're on this website and you click on and you can read about their egg color, and there's also usually like an average egg per year. That's kind of how they talk about it. So you'll see some of them will have 300 eggs per year. Some of them will lay 100 eggs per year. So you can imagine if you're really in this for the eggs and you want like the most efficient production for how much you're putting into it, you want to get higher egg layers per year than the lower ones. A lot of the pretty cute, sweet birds might not lay as often. You can also see like that's a picture of my eggs. I like colorful eggs. I want to add a couple more chickens to get the full spectrum. So I don't have any white layers right now, so I would add white layers to that. I'd also like to get a green layer to add into that, but Kristin and I both chose because we like variety in colors. We also chose hardier birds that do better in the cold winter months, which is something to think about as well. You can think about how nice they are. If you have children that want to touch chickens, there's certain breeds that do not like that at all. So you'd want to think about the docility of them. There's also the sizing. So some people have what are called bantam hens, which are tiny little baby hens. Like they're probably 2 pounds maybe at the most. They're cute, they're fine. They're not as hardy, they don't lay as often. I didn't get any, Kristin didn't get any. I'm sure people love them. And then if meat is something that you're thinking about doing, there's something called like dual purpose breeds. And those are breeds that do well with both egg laying and for meat production. So they will put on more size and weight. They taste better. They're a little bit more easy to manage by gaining weight if that's something you're interested in too. What do you want to add?
Oh, only about the ordering chicks. I think I ordered my chicks in maybe middle of January for a March 2nd delivery because I wanted to kind of get early on. They run out of things pretty quickly. And then I had the opportunity to also get some black copper Morans, which you'll see in just a second. And I was pretty excited about that.
And one thing to add on to that is that because of the avian flu, I don't know if any of you have heard about the avian flu, it hit our domestic birds pretty hard this past season. So a lot of the breeding stock was actually harmed during that. So people are ordering them sooner this year. So if you want chickens, I would get an order in as soon as possible, and you can just call Rancher Supply in Peekaboo, and they can order them for you, or you can go in there. They also have chicks that they order and sell. So my first copper Morans were ones that I brought home after going to Rancher Supply to get my brooding set up, and then I came home with chicks. So that happened. That's okay.
So I was thinking that Amy was going to put a slide in here, so that's why it's a little off center. But this is going to be an interesting, Amy and I have really a lot of similarities in terms of our chickens and what we do, but we have some real differences to it too. So all my girls have names. So Miss M is the copper Moran. You can kind of see the coppery color on her neck. Dusk is a Americana. Gigi, or Golden Girl, is a buff Orpington, and she's really the laying queen. And then Speck, because when she was young, she looked like she was wearing spectacles with those really black eyes of hers. And then Winnie is in the back. She's a silver-laced Wyandotte. But one of the things that was fascinating to me was if you look, uh-oh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Here we go. I pushed on the wrong thing. Oh, I see, there it is. So Speck has got black legs. Gigi has got white legs. Miss M has got black legs with feathers on the legs and the feet. And you can see back there, Winnie has got yellow legs. So they have different leg colors. They have different eye colors. Gigi is yellow, Speck is black. These two are golden. They have different kinds of combs. These are kind of like the classic combs with a big comb and a big red wattle. But you can see that the Americana has, I think it's called a rose comb, but I can't remember for sure. So they have different, not only different colors, different shapes, different hardinesses, but just other sort of adornments that are kind of fun. And their gotcha day, the day that I picked them up, was a year ago today. So.
I can share why I didn't add a photo. I ran out of time today. Something came up for work, so I couldn't do this. I didn't find a single picture that I had with all of my girls in one photo. I also have only named 3.5 of my chickens. So I have, I got pairs of breeds. So I have 2 Americanas, I have 2 copper Morans, I have 2 barred rocks, I have 2 silver laces. I can't tell the difference between some of them. They look identical. When they were chicks, we named them. They grew out of those things that you could tell the difference. The Americanas, we have Bernie and Nellie, and Nellie stands for Nervous Nellie because she's our excitable one that everyone picks on. And then our rooster is Willie Nelson, and then one of our copper Morans, and they look identical. We don't know who's who, but one of them got broody, so we named her Broody Barb. And we'll talk about what broody means a little bit later on. But my birds are not as, they're still pets in a certain extent, but the naming, maybe it'll come. I don't know yet.
I went out and sang happy birthday to my chickens last night.
So cute. I might have to do that. So I got some of my birds on March 22nd, and then the Americanas were back ordered for Dunlap, so they came about a month later in April, which is something to think about too, because it's hard to integrate when you have a flock and then you add new birds into the flock. That gets into a whole other, the term pecking order is for a reason. Chickens have a pecking order. It can change, as Kristin has learned, but our Americanas were not easily accepted right away. The rooster helped that relationship, which was interesting.
He likes them best.
He likes them best. We don't know why. They're very pretty. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about prepping for peeps. So I shared my story of I went to Rancher Supply to pick up watering and feeding dishes and pine shavings, and I came home with 3 chicks. I was not set up for this, so I had to figure out, because chicks need to stay warm, right? They're tiny, they're little, they're fragile, they need to stay warm. So I had to immediately set something up. I used my bathtub in my master bathroom, which was interesting. So you can see in that photo that I actually have plastic, like a plastic bin inside of that. That was to keep my bathtub a little bit cleaner. At a certain point, we ended up lining the bathtub with plastic because they got a little too big for the bin. And then when we started, we had heat lamps, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen in use. They can be dangerous. We had a thermometer in there and it was getting too hot with the heat lamp. So I looked up alternative to heat lamps and found what this is called a brooder plate. I have it on display on that back table, but it's essentially like a heating plate that the chicks can touch, and it does not hurt them at all, and it adjusts the size, so you can, if you want to mess with it, you can. This goes up and down as you spin it, so it can grow with them a little bit. I think a couple of things I just wanted to mention of why that was important for me was that it also made them feel safe and protected. They could kind of hide under it, which was really nice, kind of shelter for them. Another thing that you can't see here that I learned from a lesson with my dog, we ended up putting like a window screen on top because the chicks would jump out as they got a little bit more confident. I did lose a chick to a dog who realized what was going on and went in there and snatched it. It was heartbreaking. I did a little burial for it, and it was sad, but it happens, and it's important to learn these things. Children, while they love chicks, they can also get a little excited and squeeze them, and chicks are very fragile. So it's just really important to kind of think through the safety of the chicks as you bring them home.
So if there were a hen here, a hen develops what's called a brood patch on her chest, and it's a place where there are no feathers. And so when she leans over them, when you think of a hen sitting on some eggs, that brood patch is directly in contact with the eggs at first, but then as the eggs hatch, that's where the babies go. So it's nice and warm. And baby chicks at this age can't really generate their own heat, and that's why you need either a heat lamp or something like that. If I were going to raise chicks again, I would definitely go that route.
I know, they're so cute, aren't they? She was so pretty. She still is really pretty. This is one of my silver laces. So we kind of mentioned having your brooder set up. So things that you want in your brooder, aside from heat, are water and food. I think it's important to just tell people that because when, like Kristin was talking about, when a mother hen raises chicks, she teaches them things. She teaches them how to eat, how to drink water. When you are the mother hen with these baby chicks, you have to do that. So I was like tapping on the water dish to make a little noise and would go beep, 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 beep. And they would eventually kind of drink water. I had one that wouldn't drink water, and I researched it and found out that you just like pick it up and kind of dip its beak in the water, and then it does it, and it worked fine. Feed is kind of the same way. We also, you can see that she's on a branch. So roosting is something all chickens do. So we brought in some branches, and we actually stepped up the size of the branches as they got older. So they like to hang out on the branch and jump around and hop on the branch. What do you want to add to this? I know we have a lot listed, but.
Yeah.
Oh, great question. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure.
You have more experience than I do.
I do have
yeah.
quite a bit of experience. So pasty butt can be caused by a number of different things. Basically, they poop, but the poop is soft and it doesn't get deposited. It gets stuck on their vent. And it keeps getting added onto to a certain point where the vent is plugged. The vent is where they poop. And it will kill them pretty quickly, so you want to get that off. You don't want to be picking at it because they have tender little parts there and stuff. So what I read when I researched was to take a warm, wet, like face cloth and let them sit on it. That didn't do one bit of good. So I got a little dish of warm water and stuck its little bum in there. But eventually I was able to clean it off, and it was recurring for a couple of weeks. But it's mostly caused by stress. Sometimes it can be caused by some sort of an intestinal issue, but mostly it's stress. So it's just something that most baby chick owners experience, and you just need, because you had a couple of pasty butts too, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, very short-lived, but
Yeah.
not
so-
reoccurring, which was good. And grit, I think, kind of helps with that a little bit. So grit is separate from food. So when chickens live in the natural world, they eat little rocks and pebbles, and is it a crop? They have like this
Gizzard is what it is.
but in their throat they have a crop that like ferments food. It's all chickens are kind of weird, right? They're very strange. And they have a gizzard inside, which you might be familiar with if you've ever cooked a turkey that has a gizzard in it, right? And inside a gizzard has all these particles, and some of them are rock particles, and it helps to kind of break down. Like, we've got a lot of bacteria that helps us break down food, right? And ruminants have bacteria that help them break down food. So a gizzard and a crop are how chickens and other poultry and birds break down food. So because they're not out in your garden eating rocks, and if they free range, they would help themselves to that. You have to provide grit. So you can just buy starter grit at the store, and I do what's called free choice. So I have grit separate from food, so the chickens will help themselves to it as they need it.
And just a point, it says chick starter. There is a particular food that's designed for chickens, baby chicks. Some of it, you can get it either medicated or unmedicated. I chose to get it medicated, even though I would prefer to go the organic route. But it was mostly because I'd never done this before, and I didn't know what I was getting into. And I thought, I'll just buy a bag, use a bag, and then make that next decision. And by the time I got through, a bag of chick starter, they were just about ready to go on regular chicken food. So.
And then I don't want to overwhelm people with information, but in between chick starter and laying hen feed, there's like a pullet feed, and that's kind of called grower usually, and that's because when they start laying, they need a different protein and calcium ratio. When they're growing from, older chick to young hen, they need a different ratio. So when you go to the store, they have these 3 different types, and it's chick starter, grower, and then laying hen usually. And some people make their own feed. I think both of us just buy feed because it's very complicated. Animal nutritionists work on this and think about all the ratios of all the things they need, or you can just buy it pre-made for you, which is nice. Which is what we opt to do.
So I apologize a little bit. I didn't realize that so this is in my, on the left-hand side is the brooder. Here's the infrared lamp. Right here, I can't see it very well myself, but I'm hoping that you can, is a thermometer. So I put it directly under the heat lamp, and then it's got a separate gadget that you can actually read the temperature, because you don't want it to get too hot. And like Amy, I kept raising it and raising it and raising it and raising it, and finally went out and bought a smaller bulb. And so the Brinsea that she was showing, I think, is really a good way to go. And then here are the food and the water, and I actually can't remember. I can't see it that well from here.
You got a good one.
I do
one
have
of the
it there.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I just wanted to mention, these are the baby chicks in the box that I took and I brought a friend with me, and those
They look like Happy Meal boxes is what I thought.
Those hot and cold packs that you can stick in your microwave and heat them up a little bit. I put one under the towel because they said it could be a long ride home, you know, and it was March 2nd.
That's smart.
So they were on the little towel, and then they went into the brooder over there. Here's a picture of the feeders here. I finally put it up on this, I think it's called melamine, because they were knocking sawdust into their feed and into their water, and just getting it up a little bit made a big difference. And what I was reading, there were different views of it, but some people said you didn't want to get the baby chicks too friendly, because then they'll bond with you so tightly that you can't get away from them, and they'll be anxious if you're not around. I didn't want that, but they said that if you just start feeding pelleted food to them and let them get used to your smell and hop up in your hands, so you can kind of pick them up and move them around a little bit. So that was the option that I took. And I'm going to move myself over here to show you this other.
I like how Kristin was very prepared when she picked up her chicks. I was not. Luckily, I live closer to Rancher Supply than Kristin does, so they got home okay. But that's a good idea with the ice pack.
I guess you can see that.
We've got the little Americana. Oh, here comes the buffalo.
But what I want you to see right here, that little white stuff? Those are their first feathers.
And cheaping and a pretty good time. All the concerns from the first day have vanished, and they're all doing real well. I don't know if you can see.
Right there.
This little gal right here. Whoops. Look at those feathers.
Right there.
Isn't that amazing? Just a couple days old. She's so lined on her feathers. And this little one is starting to get a tail feather.
See it right there?
I think they're all starting to get almost all starting to get tail feathers.
It's amazing.
Oops. Sorry, Lisa. So that was those feathers when they were little fluff balls with a beginning of feathers. That was 7 days. Here is 1 week later. You can see how much bigger and more solid they are at that point. And here is just, 10 days later, basically. And look at how fast they grow in just that period of time. So from that little fluff ball where they just kind of fall over, they're so tired, they just kind of poof, to looking like young chickens. And this was just before, I wasn't sure how much they would spill things, so this is a puppy pee pad type of thing. And it was right then that I said, I think we're done with a puppy pee pad, because they were ripping things to, and it wasn't healthy for them. And I made a little perch. This one is just a 2x4 because the logs kept rolling and knocking into stuff, and so anyway. And this was, what I used was not a bathtub, but I went to, I think it was Lowe's, and got 2 of their largest moving boxes, and just cut one side out and put them together and taped. And then I have a cat, and these guys were in my guest room, and you're going to be vigilant, but you just want to make sure. So I had hardware cloth screen on the top of it as well as being vigilant. The cat did not go in that room.
Okay, so these are some of my little ones. This is in our coop run. I guess I should say a chicken coop usually includes what's called a hen house and a run. Runs can be very different sizes. So I have what's like an A-frame run that is attached to the hen house. Kristin's setup is a little bit different with her run is closer in, all contained. So you can see kind of the plastic tub. So they grew out of my bathtub pretty quickly. So about, 6 weeks in, we ended up buying one of those like metal livestock troughs that some people use for planters. You put water in. We moved them into our garage. and had them in there, and then we would bring them outside every day, as long as the weather was okay, and we would move them out in plastic tubs. And while they're still too young to stay outside all night long by themselves. If we were in a warmer climate, that might be different. It was pretty cold last April, so we waited a little bit longer, but in the meantime, we were doing all the things that are necessary to prepare our coop. So you take kind of all the stuff we talked about in the beginning with your assessing your resources and creating your coop, and then you're actually implementing it, which is when you do the build out. Things to think about are winds, heat, like do you need to shade them at all depending on where they are in your yard, because they will get hot. Visibility of them for your own self. We put water and power sources again just because it's so important to think about that. We have not created a great setup for water for ours, so even this winter, like we don't have a frost-free close to the coop, so we have to bring the water container all the way inside and fill it in the kitchen counter, and then I wash my sink out every single time because of some of the health concerns that Kristin mentioned earlier. So it'd be really great if I had an easy way to water them closer. Like, we'll get there eventually. A couple of things just to kind of reiterate about your coop design. Think about ease of cleaning. So I was when we were talking about this, I was kind of telling Kristin some of my woes about our coop because and I don't have any good photos. I was also telling Kristin that I just love taking photos of chickens. I don't take photos of all the things that it takes to have chickens. So in our coop, in all coops you have roosts, and that's where they hang out, that's where they sleep. We have these roosts against the wall, and at the very top there's a window because you need ventilation and airflow. Well, guess where they all want to roost? On the windowsill. So guess what happened to the window? It wouldn't open because their poop was covering the whole thing, and we couldn't clean it easily, right? And it was getting weird. So those are things that ideally you plan for ahead of time, or you learn and then you lead a class called Lessons from the Coop and share what you've done wrong with everybody. So I put roosting fairness because we've also had kind of the pecking order battles between who gets the top of the roost, because that's like where everyone wants to be, right? They want to be at the top. So when we expand our coop, we will be putting a roost big enough for all 9 of the chickens to be on, plus maybe more for more chickens if we go that route. We also, predator prevention is big, so I think I was saying earlier, so we've got domestic and wild predators down in Gannett, so we've got lots of neighborhood dogs, including my own, that are not necessarily chicken friendly. I have a hawk nest in my yard, I have a great horned owl in my yard, I've seen skunk, I've seen coyotes, I've seen foxes. It's a dangerous place for chickens to live out in the open. Some people still do it, we prefer not to. So you can see that there's chicken wire. Some people would put hardware cloth on the bottom of the run. Some people I've even seen put a sculpture of an owl on their chicken coop to try to deter other owls from coming or hawks from coming. So it's really important to think about predator predation. Raccoons, we don't really have raccoons in Gannett, but definitely have them here in Hailey and Bellevue, I'm sure. They're smart. They can work doors and latches, so being thoughtful about creating ways to keep them from getting into your coop is important. I don't think anyone really deals with snakes here, so in some areas of the country, snakes can come into the chicken coop and they love eggs, right? I've never heard anyone dealing with that here in the Wood River Valley, but it's just something to think about. Bedding choices, so we both use pine shavings as our bedding. You've probably seen them if you go to Bellevue Atkinson's or I always forget what it's called, the Valley Country Store. Mm-hmm. They have the big white plastic bags, and those are full of pine shavings. They're very lightweight. They smell really good, so when you add them to the coop, you want some type of bedding because it absorbs the nitrogen from their pee and poop, which is really important for cleanliness. I compost all of our shavings. I'm inviting Kristin to share all of her shavings with me in my compost because we have a good compost setup. but you want to think about how you're going to dispose of them or compost them.
For latches, one of the things I use are those little, they're like a hook and eye latch, but they've got the spring on it, so it takes kind of almost 2 hands to open it up. Oh, yeah. And that's worked really well. The other thing I use is the kind that has the slider, so you have to use your thumb. Also, most of my latches are pretty high. In terms of screening, I use 1/2-inch hardware cloth.
Okay, great.
One of the things I was reading about, and I don't have many predators, it would probably mostly be raccoons, an odd dog. That I have a completely fenced yard, the back part of my yard. But I am concerned about raccoons, and one of the things that I read was that they can come up to chicken wire, and the chickens are maybe curious, and they can reach through and grab a chicken's head, or chicken by the neck. And I'm a softie, I couldn't bear that. So when Amy's old Coop had this 1/2-inch chicken wire, I was thrilled. Let's see, what else? Yeah, that's probably it for now.
If you all have any questions, interrupt us and ask too, please.
So this is my chicken coop. Thank you, Amy. You can see, here's the hen house in the back here. This is a nest box right here. This little door opens up. There used to be one on the other side, but I read that usually 3 chickens will use 1 nest box. So that's the door inside. There are actually 2 nest boxes, so I thought that would be fine. The other one had some damage to it, so I just took that off. Let's see, what else? So this is all hardware cloth here and in the front. You can't really see it very well, but you can see wood here and then along the back and along that other side. That can all be removed. So in the summer, they get a lot more ventilation. In the winter, you can see how I made this more than 6 feet. I set it up on concrete blocks, and usually once a week, I knock my head on the sill right here still. But it's worked really well, and it's interesting that when they hang out right here and in that back corner, they're protected from the wind. And if it's cold and chilly or if it's windy, they go back there and seek protection. This has been a great system. The one thing that I'll probably change is I'll probably re-roof it this next summer and just add more eaves, because at this point this drips right on here. This mostly misses, it mostly just drips straight down. But that's called an all-in-one coop with a hen house in the back and then the run here. I have 5 chickens. Don't tell the city of Bellevue. And probably 4 would be a little bit better fit, but the chickens I have, they grew up together. They're very calm. They get along really, really well. So I haven't, one was not feeling well, and there was some pecking and, threatening displays. But once she got well, everybody's copacetic. And I'll show you in a later picture what I've done to make that small a space. It's about 10 feet long and almost 6 feet wide, so it looks it's bigger than it might appear. And then I'll show you another picture of kind of my storage woes and successes. This is one of the successes. So this is my pelleted feed. Here I have, it's a fully nutritious product, but the seeds are whole, and then all the minerals and whatnot come as a powder. What I found was my chickens wanted to eat all those seeds, and all the nutritious vitamins and minerals fell to the ground, and they didn't eat it, so I don't feed it very often other than a treat. And then also in this bin, I have what's called scratch feed, which is kind of like, here, have a Hershey bar. And when it's cold, it's nice to give them a handful or 2 just before bedtime so that they can digest that food overnight. It helps them keep a little bit warmer. But this is my garden cart, and it just lives there. In here, I have all my different kinds of grit, mealworms, a bunch of other stuff. I've got cut off milk cartons there that I get this stuff out in. But I use that cart when I go to pick up the bales of shavings, because they're fairly heavy, and sometimes I'll get 2 at a time, and I'll just load them in there and haul them to the backyard, so it's kind of a double duty sort of thing.
And do you put shavings in your run?
I put shavings in the run, and actually right here, not this one, but next to it, I have a big plastic garbage can that holds 1 bag of shavings.
Oh, nice.
So.
Okay, so back to me taking photos of my chickens and not anything related to my coop or my storage or anything. So the video on, let's see, your left is going to be the first day that we brought the chickens out there, and for like their full day, their move-in day. Okay, this is dust bathing. This is how chickens clean themselves. So we just emptied sandbags in there, and it's extremely entertaining to watch. So you can just see they just throw up dust or sand all over themselves. Isn't that great? The first time we saw this, we were like, wow, that's amazing. And what's great is when there's 7 of them all in there together and they're throwing up stuff on each other. And then usually one walks over to me and says, oh, do you have anything for me? Please give me some food. So that's Willie, that's our rooster. So you can see that his comb and wattles are bigger than the other chickens, and that's how we knew he was a rooster.
Yeah, the first time one of my girls did it, she did it in this lawn area that you'll see in a minute. But she dug a hole, and I'm like, what's she doing? And then all of a sudden she was on the ground, and it looked like she was ill. It looked like she was convulsing. And I'm like, because I knew about dusting, but I knew it in a dusty place, and this was just in the dirt. And she was like,
yeah, it's very strange. They're like, their legs kind of go out to the side and they'll tip all over. It's very weird, but it's also very entertaining to see.
So let's see if we get this other one next. Yeah.
And they don't like that noise. I use my dog baby voice when I talk to my chickens, as you can tell. So what you're seeing when they're all close together, they're scared and they might be a little cold. And once they got a little bit more comfortable, the more curious ones would hang out somewhere else and move all around. But any time that there was a loud noise, or it's really interesting when they hear the hawk, they just run together to protect themselves. They're pretty incredible animals when they're with just their instincts. They're not being taught by anyone to do any of these things. It's just their natural behavior, which is really fun to see.
Yeah, you can really tell. I mean, if we're used to raising dogs or cats, I mean, they're predators. These guys are prey. And so they've got their eyes on the side of their head, and they're very alert, especially to sounds or anything overhead. Like at first, mine would go like this if they saw or heard a jet overhead. They would really get frightened.
Yeah, so interesting. So these are my girls and boy. Again, I say my ladies and gentlemen. Is kind of how I refer to them in our household. So you can kind of see we built this run outside on a lawn. We knew that this lawn would not be there in a couple weeks, right? So they scratched it all up, ate all the bugs. And one thing that I do, and you can see here, is when I pull weeds from my garden, I give it to the chickens. One of my good friends was like, oh, I'm gonna save all these strawberry tops for you. My chickens love strawberry tops. I brought home strawberry tops. They were store-bought strawberries. The chickens were like, yeah, right. I grabbed dandelion leaves. The chickens went wild. They love dandelion leaves. It's their absolute favorite treat. They love bitter. greens. I think it's the nutritious and healthy thing for them. So they're my weed eaters, which is amazing. And they all run over to me anytime I open the door because they are expecting a treat. They just get used to it. I've even this winter, Natural Grocers had some organic dandelion greens, and I definitely bought them, some bunches of those in the dark days of winter. I also do scratch, which Kristin mentioned. I also do mealworms, and I just wanted to, so this is kind of a taboo thing, but you can see that we have treats and meat. So chickens are not vegetarians, right? They eat bugs in the wild, they eat mice, they eat all sorts of weird things. And I was reading up on it, and they also love like meat scraps. They go wild for meat scraps. So I was preparing like a chuck roast. I chopped a chuck roast to make chili, and I said, give all these meat scraps to the chickens. They went wild. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was amazed. And it's protein. It's really nutrient dense for them, so it's really good for them in the winter time to get more protein. Another weird thing that I do for my chickens is I eat raw oysters. When I shuck oysters at home, I take the shell and I put it out there, and they love that, and they go wild for all the little gooey weird bits that I don't get out of the oyster when I shuck it. I still buy vegetarian feed. So the reason, so you might have seen like these on your egg carton, vegetarian fed hens. I looked into this and I was like, I want to understand, because I know chickens aren't vegetarian. Why is this vegetarian feed thing so popular? So back in the 90s, we were doing a lot of weird things in agriculture, and we fed chickens, right? Which was weird. And there were some diseases that happened. And then more recently, one of the things that happens a lot from the fishing industry is fish meal. And fish meal is very high in protein, so they started feeding it to chickens. I have a very sensitive palate. I can taste it when a chicken gets fed with fish meal. It has like a fishy odor to it. They say it's higher in omega-3s, which are great for us. I prefer to get my omega-3s from eating fish, not my chicken eggs. So I still buy vegetarian feed. I am excited that down the line there could be a more affordable feed that has bugs mixed into it. I think that would be great. But for now, I feed vegetarian feed, and I treat them with meat products and mealworms.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add on this particular slide other than when we were talking about positioning the hen house, my hen house is underneath a conifer tree, and I put it there for a couple of reasons. One, there'd been a shed there before that the previous people had moved away, so it was just kind of a dead area. But it was also under a conifer tree, and I thought it would provide a lot of shade in the summertime that would be good. It does hinder sunlight, but it's not horrible. But one thing that happened was I had the golden girl, Gigi. I noticed that usually when chickens, they squat, they squat like this. And she was falling back like this with more of her feet up, like she was sitting on her heels. And I noticed that for a day or so, and I thought, this just isn't right. And long story short, I learned that she was actually dehydrated. It was in the middle of the summer. I have a little different watering system than Amy does, and we'll see it in a minute, but I have nipple feeders, nipple waterers, and they all knew how to use it, and the only thing I can think of is she just didn't realize that she was that dehydrated, or there just wasn't enough water coming out. In any event, I put her in a little pasture to keep her by herself, and I gave her a bowl of water, and she drank and drank and drank and drank and drank, and I thought, that's the problem. She just was getting dehydrated. So I've made some adjustments now, but yeah, I was afraid I was going to lose her.
And Gigi's so sweet.
Yeah, she's so sweet.
My coop has, on the south side of my coop and run is a big maple tree. So it gets shaded in the summertime, but full sunlight in the wintertime, which we put together on purpose for that reason. One treat that I don't have a photo of, but I love, and you'll see a really fun video of them eating a pumpkin, but I was like, okay, it's hot. They like sweet, they like red, right? They're attracted to that red color. So I eat a lot of watermelon in the summertime, so I gave them I kind of cut watermelon out of a big thing, and I said, what would they do if I just put, you know, this half of a watermelon with some flesh still in there? They destroyed the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was gone. I couldn't, and in like less than 2 hours, it was gone. And they love watermelon. So now I know that watermelon is a big treat that they like. And they also like strawberries from my yard. They just didn't like the store-bought strawberries, which was very interesting.
So are we going to talk about boredom busters and treats and meat here? I've got something else later, but did you want to talk about boredom busters yourself?
I mean, I have a swing. Our chickens have a swing. It's not, you can't see it well in this photo, but see there's like a big branch here. And then at one point my husband got really creative and did a whole roosting setup and then put a swing with a branch in the middle. None of the chickens like it on purpose. Sometimes they accidentally get up there and then they flop around, and it's more entertainment for us than for them. Why don't you talk about boredom busters that you use?
I'll do it in
great.
another slide.
Great.
There's a book in the back, it's called How to Speak Chicken, and it's about the different behaviors, looks, gestures, and vocalizations that chickens use to express themselves. And the woman who wrote the book said, she's a speech communications specialist, she has a master's degree or something, and she said that every time she realized that every time she went out to the coop, that they would make this certain sound, and she would never hear it any other time, and she thought that was so odd. And all of a sudden, she realized that that was their name for her.
Oh, that's so cute.
And of that flock, all of the chickens have passed away except for one, and then some new chickens have come in, and the one older chicken taught a couple of the new ones her name. So
I'm gonna go pay attention to that now. Next time I go home, the biggest noise. Well, they make a lot of different noises. What I found the most entertaining was that our rooster, when we put scratch out or treats out, he walks over to the middle of the pile and makes this interesting sound, and he's calling all the chickens, and then he spreads out all of the treats for all the chickens to get evenly. Because if it was all in one pile, they would kind of get a little mean with each other, and they'd want it more, and they like steal treats out of each other's mouths and run around with it. It's really funny. But he is the egalitarian, so he goes over, spreads it all out, and then calls them all, and then he walks in the middle of them and he lets them all feast, and he might take a couple bites, but it's very interesting.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Miss M, who is the one on the far side, she's the black copper Moran. She's the biggest of the hens, and she's a peacemaker. And I swear to God, at least 4 times, maybe 6 times, when a couple of them were kind of doing this to each other, she would come and stand in between them until they broke off and went different directions. And at first it was like, did I really see that? Nah. And then I saw it again and again, and eventually kind of the personality settled down, everybody was calm, but she pushed her way right, and she stood right there in between. And is that interesting?
They're very fascinating. I mean, I would sit out there on like Saturday morning. I would bring my coffee outside with my bench and my blanket because it would be cold, and I'd just sit there and watch them. And it was like watching a soap opera. I mean, I don't watch soap operas. I don't know if that's true. To me, it was like watching a soap opera that I've never watched. But it was just so entertaining, and they're they're amazing, and each one has a different personality, and the ways that they interact with each other and they interact with you and the world around them is just fascinating. And like, our neighbors also have roosters, so his cockle-doodle-doo at the beginning was like very blunt. He was not very good at it. And every time the neighbors would cockle-doodle-doo, he would cockle-doodle-doo. So it becomes a cockle-doodle-doo war between the roosters, and they love it, and the hens love it, and it's like, okay. Great.
Yeah, show off for us, guys.
Anytime during the day, too. It's not just the morning, as I said earlier.
So I don't have a big yard. I have a very little yard. It's one of those 60 by 100 foot Bellevue lots. It's tiny. So I had to do everything small size. So this is my pasture. It's a dog run. It's about 6 feet. It's not quite 6 feet by 6 feet. And during the summer, I would come home from work and pick them up, and put them in one at a time with a little water there. And oh, they would peck and scratch and, you know, roll and just have a marvelous time. I'd leave it in that location for a week, and not the chickens in it, but the location of the pen. And then I would move it, so I would kind of make a circle. And of course, that particular area was covered with chicken poop, which I raked. I took some of the bigger pieces off, but I think it still benefited the yard. And then this picture on the right is after I'd cut things back for fall. I thought, because they will, I hear, they will devour hostas. I've got some beautiful hostas. They will, you know, anything with a tender leaf, they will go after. Maybe not irises, that's what's remaining there. But they'll go after almost everything. And so once everything had been pretty well cut back, then I let them range around the yard. And it was just heartwarming to see them actually really for the first time be able to free range. And one time I was sitting, there's a chair right there, and I was sitting there eating something, and Miss M came and she hopped up on my leg, and I thought, oh, isn't that sweet? And then she reached out and she pulled what I had in my hand, just like that, and she hopped off and she ate it.
That's
so
awesome.
She was fast. So for my toys and treats, let me start over here. So I move my elements around. This is the run area. Like I said, it's the whole distance to the back there is about 10 feet, and across is 6 feet. This is my water with the nipples. This is the food serving thing. This is the ramp that goes up into the hen house. And you can see that I have, this is, what's it called, that pressed, those boards. What's that called?
Particle board?
Not particle, not chip. It's their pressure treated lumber. Nope, I think it's pressure treated lumber here and here, so that the coop could set on the cinder blocks, but then you didn't want the holes in the cinder blocks and all that stuff. So I put that there. Well, it turns out that they'll hop up here, they'll walk along here, they'll go over here, they'll go over here, they'll walk over here, they'll hop down. They'll go over here, they'll hop up on that thing. Then they'll come around over here. Then they'll fly over to here, then they'll hop here, and then they'll walk over there. They get a lot of, I was worried that they wouldn't get enough exercise and enough like stimulation. But then the other thing that I do is I move the parts around. So you can see in this one, this 2x2 goes this way. In this one, it goes this way. I've moved the water has a short cord, so it just kind of stays there, but I've moved the food over here. This is one heat lamp and one heat lamp, where on this one up here, they're in a row. So every week or so, I move these parts around to give them something new to think about, you know? And then the other thing I do is I was feeding them treats, and you know, I buy bulk sunflower seeds, and you can go to, I think all the Atkinsons, but the Bellevue Atkinsons is closer to me, and they'll pull off the old leaves or wilted things of vegetables and put them in a big garbage can, and you can go there in the morning and pick through. And my girls love bok choy and cauliflower and broccoli and cabbage. And so what I do is, you can't see it very well, you can almost see it here, but there's this really cool gadget. It's just stainless steel with a little circle on the end of it, and then a little opening, and you can hook a cable or a metal chain, and the upper part of the middle chain has another hook to it. So what I've done here's the metal part, is I just stabbed this little cabbage with it. And then I hook it onto the hook. This goes up to, well, it actually goes up to an area right there. And they peck at it, and it swings back and forth, and and I do apples, and you know, I got some leaves of cabbage, and so I'll spear them so that one leaf goes this way, one leaf goes this way, one leaf goes this way, and one leaf goes this way, and they think that's great. So I do that most mornings. You can see I've stabbed an apple here. But I was, back in the time when Gigi was feeling under the weather and the rest of the hens were picking on her, I only had one of these doggy slow feeders. And my gentle, peace-loving Miss M would stand over the feeder and make sure that Gigi didn't get any. And so I got 2 feeders, and so I put them in different parts, and so it disperses them, and everybody gets a chance to, get the mealworm or the sunflower seeds or the, whatever delicacy, strawberries, tomatoes. Oh my, tomatoes! Woo-hoo! You will get very frothy poop, I will tell you, just in case you needed to know that. But that's another way that I try to treat boredom and just give them new things to think about almost every day.
Yeah.
So.
One thing that I like to do so I don't have the hardware cloth, I have chicken wire, so the openings are a little bit bigger, but I'll go in my garden and harvest any weeds or a bunch of dandelion greens or old kale, whatever it is, and I'll put it through the holes of the run, and they love that because it's like a little buffet for them, and they just run around and they grab things and they run and they chase each other, and it's fun. But we definitely have a lot more run space, so we don't do as much with boredom busters. But I think that I like that idea of the hanging, because it's entertainment for me, right? The chickens probably like it too, but I would really like that.
That's on the resource list. That's how high it is on my
Interesting.
Yep.
Oh, okay, so I forgot I put a video on here. This is one of our chickens. She doesn't have a name yet. She looks identical to her twin sister. So the video is her announcing. So another noise that they make that's unique is the noise that they tell you they laid an egg. This is really early on when she was our first layer. You can see that's my husband holding up 2 of our eggs, but this is her laying an egg and announcing it.
And before we play this, they practice this call.
Yes.
And you'll be wherever you are, and you're like, what was that? It's like, that was almost like as you'll hear, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, it wasn't. But they practice making these sounds, and then finally it kind of comes on, and they're able to.
A video I almost put on here but didn't was from the other side when she was laying an egg. And you can see Willie, the rooster, who's sitting right in front of the nest box watching her. And then I've also seen 4 chickens in one nest box together. So there's a lot of fun that goes on in that coop. So proud. And that's very different than other noises that she makes at different times of the day. And she was telling me.
And sometimes one will do that, and it's like coyotes, you know, if you've ever heard one coyote go, yip, 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 and then you'll hear another and another. And you'll get I've had all 5 of my girls doing that, even though one was the one that.
You're like, we'll take credit for the egg too.
And that was my first egg.
Which is really exciting.
Yeah, it was it's wonderful. You know, when an egg comes out of a hen's body, it's 106 degrees, because her internal temperature is 106 degrees. And if you get there kind of quickly, you just hold it up, and it's like a little, sort of a hard hot water bottle, kind of. It's just, and just the whole process of laying eggs is fascinating. Chickens are born with all the egg germ plasma, I think it's called, in their body. And so it's very, very high up in their reproductive area. And then it takes 19 hours, once they're producing eggs, it takes 19 hours to go from that kind of germ storage area, 19 hours to come down the funnel. It's something or other funnel. And at that point, there's like 3, and then it takes 25 hours for it to go from that next stage to emerging from the chicken. And it goes through 3 different stages of adding white, the albumin, and some are thicker, some are thinner, thicker, more viscous, some are thinner. And then at the end, close to the end, that's when the shell is put on. Once the shell's put on, it's colored. And then the last thing that happens is that there's a waxy coating that goes around the shell that allows you to allows an egg to stay fresh for a couple of months, actually. And then the other thing that's really interesting, it comes out the same orifice, the vent, as the poop does. But what happens is the cloaca comes in this way, the lower intestines come in this way, and what happens is the cloaca pushes out through the vent and then opens and delivers the egg. So that's how come the eggs can come out the vent and not be covered in poop. Wow. Isn't that interesting?
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Yes?
Sex education, thank you very much. So grabbing the egg so that you can take a picture and all that, are they protected at all?
So, well, we're going to talk a little bit about broodiness, but a lot of, so this comes down to breed. And in our industrial agricultural world, we've bred out like the motherhood gene of a lot of chickens. So in commercial chicken laying operations, like they don't care at all, right? They lay an egg and they move on. Some of our breeds, some of the more heritage breeds or older style traditional breeds still have the mothering gene in them. They can get protective. Usually when that happens, it's called going broody. So a hen will go broody, and that means she wants to lay and hatch her clutch. So because I have a rooster, my eggs are fertilized, right? The rooster mounts the hen, and they touch cloacas, which is the sex of the chicken. My husband and I looked this up because we're like, how does this happen? Like, this is very weird.
Yeah, because the rooster's on the hen's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kristin's eggs are not fertilized. Regardless, either of us could have a hen that goes broody, and she will stop laying eggs. She will stay on her clutch, and it's like, human mothers are incredible people that give a lot to have a child. These chickens do not get up for like 23 hours. They might get up one time a day and go to the bathroom and drink water and eat food, and they stay on that clutch. And I've had a broody hen, Broody Barb. She's been broody twice now. The first time was in December. I was like, you must be confused. It is not springtime. She plucked out all of her feathers on her belly because she wanted that skin-to-skin contact. We had to push her out of the laying box every day so that she would feed and drink water, and we would collect the eggs. And she actually, we would like put gloves on and lift her up, and she'd grasp on our finger, and we'd collect eggs from under her. We'd set her back down, and she would still be broody. And so if we wanted to hatch out chicks, she would probably be a very good mother. We were amazed because none of the eggs she was on, because we have different colors, so copper Morans lay these beautiful, we both have copper Morans in our eggs, dark brown, beautiful chocolate eggs. None of the eggs she was ever laying on were dark brown. And we're like, but she's in the nesting box all day. What is she doing? And we're pretty convinced that she was picking up eggs from the other nesting box, either with her claws or moving them with her beak and pushing them under her in the nest box. We want to get that on video because it's amazing. So sorry, did we answer your question? Yeah, okay. Depends on the chicken. But yes, usually like we both have outdoor accessible nesting boxes that we kind of, Kristin opens hers up, I open mine down, and then you just grab eggs. And we both I put pine shavings in mine, you use Timothy hay. And that helps to keep the eggs both warmer, especially in the winter time, but also cleaner. So if you get eggs from a friend or your own eggs or from a farmer and they're kind of dirty, it's usually because their nesting boxes don't have anything in there. Where like neither Kristin or I wash our eggs and they're pretty clean. Because we have something in the nesting box that the egg is laid on. So it's covered in a bloom, and it can be sticky and wet, so it can pick up things. So if there's poop in there or feathers, it will pick that up. If there's pine shavings or hay, it will pick that up.
Yeah, as cold as this winter was, I only had, I think, 2 eggs that froze in the nest box, and I thought this was going to be an issue all winter. I actually did not want an external nest box for that very reason, but I ended up with a coop that had that. And what I did was I added extra hay, and I haven't had, and I collect them every night, but I haven't had any problem other than that first, like I think it was in November, you know, when it got so very cold. So,
Okay,
eggs.
lots of eggs. So we just kind of briefly talked about cleaning. So when I harvest eggs and I notice something's on them, I'll kind of knock it off when I'm outside, right? I don't wash eggs. Kristin doesn't wash eggs. If you're a commercial operator, you legally have to wash eggs in the United States. When you wash eggs, it removes the bloom, and that makes it susceptible to pathogens to come in because it's no longer protected. That's why it's mandated that you refrigerate eggs. So I leave my eggs unwashed on the counter for weeks, and they're fine. Kristin refrigerates her eggs.
Yeah, I read in one of the books that for every day you leave it outside, like on your counter, you lose a week of freshness, and an egg will stay fresh for 2 months.
Yeah.
So you're not losing a lot, but it's just something that I like to do.
Yeah.
So, although I love the basket with the eggs in it, that's really lovely.
We have like a corner in our kitchen that's dedicated to eggs because we get a lot of eggs and we go through them pretty quickly. So we've never dealt with like the shelf life issue. And I love seeing them out. And I do bake a lot. And you know, when you bake, you're supposed to bring your eggs to room temperature. My eggs are now always at room temperature, ready to be baked with, which is great. So we both have baskets on the back table there. Those are great for storing or collecting. You can collect egg boxes. I think in the other picture you saw that I like a ceramic. When I bought store-bought eggs, I would buy them at the store and then put them in my cute little ceramic thing in the fridge because I liked it better than an egg carton. I found like a plastic, almost like a Tupperware thing at the thrift store that was for a dozen eggs, so I have that too. So you can get creative with storage and you can just ask your neighbors for egg cartons because everyone has overwhelming amounts of egg cartons. Preserving eggs. So if you have a lot of eggs, more eggs than you can cook, which happens, there are a lot of methods. We only put a couple up here, the ones that we're probably the most comfortable with. So you can see that beautiful thing is a frittata. I love frittatas. You can, like, people are like, oh, how do you freeze eggs? I'm like, well, you can actually freeze eggs in ice cube trays, cracked open. You can also freeze frittatas and quiches and muffins and all sorts of things that you make with eggs and pound cake, whatever you want. You can just freeze it whole and then you have a meal with your eggs. On the far left, those are beet pickled eggs. So I hard boiled eggs and I made pickled beets. I ate the beets. I had the juice. I put the hard boiled eggs into that. They were pickled and they were purple and it's beautiful. I'll just like mention another method that there's 2 methods that I'm going to try this coming summer. One is curing yolks. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's like fancy that they do at all these high-end restaurants. So they take egg yolks and cover them in salt, and it like cures the yolk, and then you shave it almost like cheese. I've eaten it. I've never made it. I'm gonna try that. And then I also was reading about preserving them in lye water, which we were both like, that's a little nerve-wracking. But you take a whole egg in its shell and preserve it in a jar full of lye water, and apparently you can keep them for years like that, and you pull them out, you wash them off and crack them and cook them like you normally would. I can't say it works. I can tell you that my Homesteady Facebook group that I'm part of all talk about doing it. So I'm gonna try it this year.
So I'm not quite that adventurous. My hens stopped laying in about November. It was November. And I've been doing some reading about, just because they were still producing quite a number of eggs, and I thought, well, what can I do to kind of get myself through this kind of desert of production? And I had read that you can blend the eggs together, egg and yolk, add a little bit of salt, a little bit of water, and then freeze it in a muffin tin. So that's what I did. They suggest that you don't make the egg frothy, but you blend all the parts. And I just put a light coating of oil on one of the larger of the muffin tins, poured it in, stuck it in the freezer, brought it back out when it was frozen, set it in a little bit of warm water, because it turned out that the the cooking oil it didn't pop out like I thought I was going to. Maybe silicone muffin tins. I've been looking for silicone muffin tins. But anyway, then I just froze them in the freezer, and they were wonderful. I had them for scrambled eggs. I baked with them. I did all kinds of stuff with them. I made frittatas with them. I made omelets, and they were great. So, yeah.
Lots of ways to preserve eggs. I have not bought any eggs since last August. Have you? No.
No.
Yeah. This is great. Here's a picture of my coop. So you can see, I don't think I mentioned this earlier. We have an automatic door. So we have it set on a timer, so it opens up at a certain time every day and closes, and the chickens, there was a couple times in the summer that they did not get inside on time. There's also been a couple times where it didn't open because of the shavings kind of blocking it. But we didn't think we wanted it at first, and then I was reading and asking friends about it, and they were like, you have to. Because if you wanted to travel, or you want to sleep in, or you have an early morning meeting and you can't get out there to let them out, they like routines. So we have an automatic coop on the resource doc that we shared. I have the link to the coop that I ordered. It has a remote control, it has a daylight sensor, it has a timer. It's great. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. So this is preparing for the first winter. This is the first snow. You can see almost all of them are right at that line. So it's hard to see in this photo, but in this A-frame in our run, on the back half, we had metal on one side to create shade in the summertime, and then plastic, like a hard kind of polycarbonate plastic on this side, so that let in morning sun, but still provided wind protection. And then we were like, well, we don't really want the metal in the wintertime because it won't let light in and it's cold to the touch, right? But we needed wind protection. And then when we saw this, that they were like, ooh, we don't want to go on that other half of the run because there's snow over there, we decided to wrap the entire run in plastic film. And that's what we have now. So I've been able to keep it clear on the winter, during the winter with the snow with a broom. It lets in sunlight. It prevents the wind, which has been really great, and something that I was hesitant because I don't like using plastic because we won't be able to reuse it, right? We'll have to take it down this spring and it'll go into the plastic film recycling bin, hopefully, if it's not too dirty. But for the health of the chickens, that was really important for us to do. My chickens have kept laying all winter long. So what I've read is that the first year, they're like confused and they don't know it's winter, so they keep laying. And then by the second year, they kind of stop laying. And you can add lights to help trick them. But we've enjoyed eggs all winter long, where Kristin had a while that she wasn't getting eggs again.
About a month and a half.
Yeah. Other things with winter coop prep. So one thing I really struggled with was everyone was like, don't let your coop be drafty, right? Because drafty, they can get wind chills, you can let critters in because it's warm and there's food in there for mice, right? And then they're like, but you want airflow. I'm like, well, what's the difference between drafty and airflow? I still don't know. My husband knows because he works in the construction trade, so he's a little bit smarter than I am when it comes to this kind of stuff. We have windows in our coop, so we can open windows to air things out. And then we use like spray foam insulation. Kristin mentioned that chickens are curious and they ate her puppy pads. Our chickens went wild for blue insulation. It was a battle. We ended up covering it all, but that was something we weren't really expecting. And we don't use the nipple waterers. We use like a metal kind of trough waterer, and we have a heating. I have that on the resource list too. We bought a heating element that the water sits on because you don't want your water to freeze. Our water and our food are all in our hen house, not in our run, because our run is more open air than Kristin's run.
Yeah, my setup's different. I don't have food and water in the hen house. It is in the run. So the hen house is just exclusively for them to spend the night. There are two little windows, they're sort of windows, they're little things like this with hardware cloth on the inside. So in the summer I open that up so I can get a nice cross ventilation. In the winter I closed it up. November was so cold and we've had a lot of wind this year. And so I even put plastic over those little openings because, you know, there was a gap like this. And I also, I don't have a heat lamp in the hen house. I read that that's dangerous, so I didn't do that. But what I did do was get a zero clearance infrared panel. So it's about this big by this big. It's got a low setting, off, low, and high. It's zero clearance, so they can get right up to it. They can actually touch it. So where their roost is, the panel is probably 6-8 inches in front of them, and they walk up the ramp. They get on the roost and they just face that infrared panel, and it's kind of cute. But that's worked really well. The thermostat thermometer that I used in the brooder, I hung that in the hen house so I can monitor the interior temperature of the hen house. And then I've got a digital outread that I actually put by my bed so that when I go to bed at night I can keep an eye on just how cold is it getting there, you know? And I think the coldest night in the hen house was 24, 25 degrees. Oh, wow. Mostly it's in the 28 or something like that. So I feel good about that.
And they run hotter than we as humans run, so, and they clump together when they're cold. I got the infrared panel. My ladies don't care for it. I don't even know if they know it exists, but it's not on our roost. As I explained to you all earlier, our roost is now our windowsill, so we couldn't put the infrared panel. So we still use, and you can see the red light, we still use a heat lamp in the chicken coop, and we dust it pretty much every day because that's the big danger. If there's dust accumulated, it could start a fire. People all around the country have hen house fires because of that. So we're hyper aware of it. It's another reason for me that I love that I can see this from my kitchen, right? If it was on the other side of the property, not visible, and a fire started, who knows what would happen. But because it's visible, because we're conscientious with dusting, we do keep the heat lamp going, and then we usually turn it off during the day if it's above 25 degrees outside because it gets too hot in there, which has not happened a lot this winter, but now in springtime that'll happen more, so we'll be more diligent with only putting it on at night if it's gonna get really cold.
And that's what I do with the infrared panel. It only goes on at night. The coop is its natural temperature, whatever that is, but I do have those 1 or 2 heat lamps in the run itself.
Yeah.
So they keep themselves warm there.
More things about winter, let's see. Oh, we don't have a cute photo. Were you gonna put your?
I was looking for molting hens.
Oh, that's right.
I had 3 hens that decided in November, in the coldest weather that we got, that it was time to molt. And there were feathers everywhere. And so anyway, that's when I added a second infrared lamp to the run and all that, but they came through that all
And
right.
molting is a natural process that happens for most chickens every single year. And
usually in the fall, but usually not in November.
And the first years, they might be figuring out, I didn't have any molting hens this year. They lose all their feathers and grow back new feathers. What I had were broody hens, and I talked about Broody Barb a little bit earlier. I think I talked to you all about how I broke that brood. It was not fun. I hope she gets broody in the springtime and hatches me out some chicks. We'll see. I don't know. It was very strange. I was very nervous for her because she wasn't eating, and like Kristin mentioned earlier, in the cold they need to eat more to digest, to build body heat. So we were like bringing her treats in the laying box multiple times per day. We were picking her up every night to bring her out to feed with people. People would visit her in the brooding, in the nesting box, which was sweet. We were concerned, but she did okay. We'll see what happens, but I'd like her to brood in the springtime and hatch me out some chicks, so we'll see if that happens.
So this is the first year for both of us. And one thing I didn't mention early on was when the girls started to lay eggs, the first eggs were small.
Oh, yeah.
Many of them didn't have a shell around them. They were squodgy, you know, or maybe it was a partial shell, I don't know. But so anyway, their first eggs were, you know, about this big, and then they got bigger, and now they have their size, whatever it is. But here we've got a very early broody hen, not even 1 year old, being broody. And then my girls molting, which is usually like Amy said, they don't do it until the second year. But my girls, I guess, are eager beavers or something. So that first year, there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of just discovery and surprise, really.
Yeah.
So, the woes of winter are going on and on and on. So this is my little house, or actually my backyard. So I'm standing at my back door where I can too also see the chicken coop. But you know, here's the chicken coop. You can't see it here, but there I have to shovel in front here. I have to shovel back here to get to the nest box. In the summer, I keep my chicken stuff right here, which is really close. But in the winter, this roof slides, and the snow level's about like this, and I have to climb up over part of the roof and then hang on to something and slide down to the roof itself. So the chicken stuff are now in this shed, so I have to, you know, shovel to that shed. So as you're thinking about siting your chicken coop, really think about, I mean, I wasn't expecting winter was going to be quite this heavy. I mean, of course it does, but I was thinking I might get a bit of a pass on it, but I didn't. And the other thing is my little side yard, which is kind of coming in from this side here, is really windy. My house that part of the house faces south, and we get wind from the southwest. I've got a 6-foot privacy fence, so that area between the house and the fence, it's windy. And that wind hits the side of the chicken coop right here. And you know what Amy was saying about, you know, you don't want to give them drafts. I really wanted my hens to see bright light. I wanted them to be able to look outside and see the world. I went to Lowe's, I went to Home Depot, I went online. I finally decided I wanted polycarbonate. Polycarbonate is ridiculously expensive, so I'd kind of given up, and I was just going to do visqueen plastic, which I really didn't want to do, but you know, you just got to make a decision. Winter was coming. And then I went to the building materials thrift store for something else, and I said, you guys don't happen to have any polycarbonate? Oh yeah, over here. So there were these little thin panels. They were only, I don't know, 3 feet by maybe 18 inches or something. I could cut them with scissors. I could install them with a staple gun, and so I have it on this side, the other side, and then these are the doors right here. These panels right here do not have it, because I just wanted to make sure that there was plenty of ventilation and stuff. But super nice.
Will you take the polycarbonate off?
I will,
Will you be able to reuse it?
I believe so. I bought all they had. So I've got quite a bit left over. But my plan is to take it off and reuse it. I think I should be able to do that. And then whenever it was a month and a half ago, when it was so bitter and the wind chills were minus 20, and I mean, it was just awful. And the coop was getting colder and colder, and I just thought, you know, I can't leave my girls out there in the cold. And this is a dog kennel in the guest room that I put Gigi in when she wasn't feeling well. I took her to the vet, you know, a $5 chicken going to the vet, you know, cost more than $5 to have the vet say, I'm not sure what's wrong with her. But anyway, the kennel was still standing there. So I just brought my girls in. I picked them up one at a time. I gave them a little bit of a roost, you know, here's their treat thing. There's food back in here. And they came in at night, and then I hauled them back to the chicken coop in the morning. But I did that. I did it for 4 nights. I probably could have done it for 3 nights, but it was really cold, and I was worried about them. So.
I have not done that, but our rooster did get frostbite on his comb. So the comb, which is the thing that comes out of their head, and their wattles, the bigger they are, the further away from their body they are, the more likely they are to get frostbite. So Willie, being a rooster, his comb and wattle are bigger than any of the other chickens, so he has a little frostbite. It doesn't look pretty, it does not hurt him. So he's just dealing with it, which is kind of sad because he was a very handsome rooster, and now he's a little rough around the edges rooster. We'll see how he does.
Mm-hmm. And they can get frostbite on their feet.
Yep.
They can actually lose toes to frostbite.
And so when you see them on the roost, they often sit on their feet, and that's to keep their feet warm. And the feathers can help with that too, as like the leg feathers. But the feet, the combs, the wattles are the most susceptible to frostbite. And frostbite happens, and I think this might be the difference between Kristin and my microclimate, is that in Gannett, we get the fog down there. So I had a couple days where it was like 5 degrees and 90% humidity, which is when he got his frostbite. So that's when the ventilation and airflow really make a difference, is the humidity.
So I think we just have a couple more slides here.
Do we? Oh,
So we've gotten through winter, they've survived. We're now in January and February. And so one of the things that I've done is I'm a numbers person, so I like to chart things. So I kind of forgot to do this first part, but I got, maybe a dozen eggs into the middle by all the girls in the middle. But then I really started keeping track. So here we have the 19th, I got 1 egg, the 20th, none, the 21st, 3. It was my first 3-egg day. Then 1 egg, then 3 eggs, then 3 eggs, then 3 eggs, then my first 4-egg day, woohoo! And then 2 eggs and 2 eggs, my first 5-egg day, my second 5-egg day. And it's fun to just see who's producing, who's regular. Because of that 25-hour egg-laying cycle, they'll lay later and later and later in a day, and then they'll skip a day. And then they'll start earlier in the day, and then kind of move through. So I just think of it as a rest day. But yeah, daylight increases. We've all noticed that. And Amy said that her hens were still producing. Mine weren't. They stopped. And then like about the middle of the first week in January, they started kind of trickling out.
But they eat more and drink more as the the days are longer. We've already adjusted the times so we're letting them out earlier in the morning. We're letting them in later into the night. For them, it's really daylight. Right? As soon as the sun is out, they want to be outside. As soon as it's getting dark, they want to be inside. So we adjust the timing on our automatic door for that. And I mentioned earlier, like turning off heat lamps during the day, or unplugging, or turning off your infrared, if that's something that you use.
Yeah, chickens can't see very well. And so if they're wild, as it starts to get dusky, they will fly up into trees to roost to protect themselves. And that's one of the motivations when it starts to get dark. They think, I've got to go to safety. And we've created a place called a hen house with a roost that they feel safe.
Yeah. So even if you had free-range chickens, like neither of us do free-range for the reasons that we shared earlier, a lot of people that still do free-range, they go into the hen house on their own right before it gets dark. And that's just part of their natural routine because they're prey animals, so they want safety. Okay, I know we're over 7 o'clock, so I hope
resources.
This is okay.
Friends who have chickens.
Yay, it's been fun. And I am friends with a lot of farmers because I work in the agricultural world, so I've talked to a lot of farmers about chicken things too, and they obviously manage things very differently. But I mostly talk to them about health issues and what's going on with health things. But friends, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all I've ever done is gone to Jay at Rancher Supply in Peekaboo, and he was so helpful and informative and encouraging. I mean, I called him out and said, Jay! And he was really helpful. The U of I Agriculture Extension Office in Hailey is really helpful. All you have to do is go online and type in chickens, or chicken feed, or chicken toys, or chicken resources, or chicken doors, or chicken coops, or whatever. There's an
and on our resource list, we listed some websites because anyone can publish anything on the internet. So double check your sources on the internet when you Google search thing. If you see something that seems weird, see if like at least 5 other people are saying the same thing. Don't trust just one source. We've tried to put sources down that are a little bit more reputable. One of the people that I follow, literally her job is like to be a blogger about chickens. And she makes her entire income from posting Instagram videos of her chickens. She has like her special breeds at the hatchery that is in her community. Like, this is her job. So I trust her a lot more than I trust, you know, some random person just posting stuff when it would be like if I started calling myself a chicken expert and posting all this information that I've learned with less than 1 year of experience.
Yeah, which we forgot the disclaimer at the
Yeah.
top of the
We're not
hour, which was
experts.
like, we're not experts. We're just throwing information at you. Libraries are a great place. I showed you a couple books at the beginning, and we've got a nice collection of books now. I don't know about all of the vets, but I know Dr. Lori is really good with chickens. She likes chickens. She's just very respectful when she handles them, which I always appreciate. And then our resource sheet.
Yeah. I think we're ending with some videos, right? So this was a viral like TikTok, Instagram thing that happened this fall where it was called like the pumpkin carving contest. So you would put a pumpkin in there with, like, you would do a little bit of the carving, but then you would put it in there and see what your chickens created. They loved it. I loved it. So we have a couple of videos for you all.
We'll see which one turns on first.
Yeah, and we don't really.
That one.
Doing the trends. Hard to film, and put a pumpkin down.
Are these your chickens then?
Yeah. Oh yeah, these are both my chickens. And that's me putting this pumpkin down. And they're interested.
I don't know.
Yeah, they don't know yet. That's
They're
Willie telling people.
They're so chicken. See how some are more timid, some are bolder.
What was fascinating to me after watching this behavior for a little bit, and I don't think we see it in this video, they loved the pumpkin seeds the most because pumpkin seeds have the most nutrition.
Yeah, my girls do not like pumpkin, period. Squash of any
Really?
sort, nope.
Oh yeah, mine love it. And this is once they get a little bit more comfortable, and you can see they're like picking it out. Oh, she's pecking me. They're very curious. So that's the kind of behavior that the rooster does to like spread out treats. He can't spread the pumpkin, but he was trying to. And then I didn't capture it well on video, but if one of them got a clump with like the inside guts and the pumpkin seeds, she would run around with it and they'd try to steal it from each other, which is funny. So
Pretty
that's,
amazing. So that's it. So thank you very
yeah,
much.
this was
And,
really fun.
So I just want to make sure that everybody got a raffle ticket, and although
I think we have enough for
I think we've got enough
Yeah, I
for
think we have
everybody.
enough.
So we have a half-dozen eggs for each of you. So from our girls. So yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments or
yeah.
just want to talk
Yeah.
about chickens, because obviously after us talking for almost 2 hours, you can tell we like to talk about chickens. It's been really fun.
Any questions that anybody has? Or?
So you said that your chickens like pumpkin, and you said yours don't have it. Is there kind of a peer leader among your chickens? I mean, does that influence what the whole group decides they like?
So the question was, her chickens love pumpkin, my chickens don't love pumpkin. Is there a leader in the flock that might initiate, decide what we're going to eat?
I'd be interested. I think that's like an observational thing. I bet there's something with that. I think the rooster, and some of the behavior I mentioned that he does, I think he helps initiate the curiosity, because he's basically saying, here's something edible, let's check it out. Because you don't have a rooster, maybe that dynamic isn't there. I don't know. And there are some things chickens shouldn't eat. Do you have a list of those?
Yeah, I
thought
do,
you did.
actually, yeah.
And pumpkins are okay, watermelons okay, strawberries are okay.
Yeah.
But there's a couple
avocado, chocolate, citrus, onions and garlic, raw potato skins, salty food, spicy food are all not good for your hens. And there are some foods, like I mentioned before, tomatoes and actually apples. If you feed them too much, they get a pretty frothy poop. So
I'd be interested to hear from other people that raise chickens to know. My girls seem to, when one of them shows interest, they all show interest. But I haven't, aside from those strawberry tops that they weren't that into at the beginning, there hasn't been much. I shouldn't say that. They don't really like Brussels sprouts. Like when I prep Brussels sprouts and I like chop the bottoms off and take out the outside leaves, they're not interested in that at all, which I thought they would be because they like bitter things. Mm-hmm. So I was like, what's the difference between a dandelion leaf or a prickly lettuce leaf and a Brussels sprout?
And
to
my
the chicken.
chickens love anything, any brassica. Yeah.
Don't know.
Any other questions or comments or?
What breed did you have?
I have a black copper Moran, buff Orpington, Americana, Astralorp, and a silver-laced Wyandotte. That's the real speckly black and white one.
Yeah, that's this lady. So I have 2 silver lace Wyandottes. I have 3 copper Morans. My rooster's a copper Moran. I have 2 barred rocks. So this is the barred rock. So a lot of people are like, oh, they look so similar. So the silver lace is this kind of like scalloped look. The barred rock is more of like a line, like a stripe. And then I have Americanas as well. I think that's mine.
And you're thinking about getting leghorns.
Probably leghorns for the white eggs, and then it's not so much a technical breed, but they're called olive eggers. It's a mix. Like an Americana is not a pure breed. It's a mix to get blue eggs. So olive eggers are another breed, a mixed breed that lays green eggs, and I really want green eggs. Mm-hmm. There is, I can't remember the name. Do you remember the Indonesian chicken that's like all black?
Oh. I remember seeing it. Yeah, this black tongue, black skin, black legs, black eyes, black comb, black wattle.
Black blood.
Yeah, I just saw a picture of it actually recently.
It's like an Indonesian. It's actually like used in traditional people think of it as kind of being like dark magic. And someone had one up here that they were trying to sell, and they were selling it for like $400.
Wow.
But.
Yeah, so if there are no more questions, thank you everybody for coming out tonight, and come on over and
help
get
yourself
some
to
eggs. So thank you. There's one on the box there. Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. This was really fun.
It was.
This was so much fun.